Cari amici, benvenuti a questo evento, organizzato da Opificio Innova, all'interno della mostra House of Robotics. Il tema di oggi è blockchain e metaverso, e ne parleremo con due ospiti illustri. Amy Peck, dirigente di sviluppo aziendale e strategia, con anni di esperienza nel lavoro con le start-up, e Carlo Mannoni, direttore generale della Fondazione di Sardegna. La tecnologia blockchain e il metaverso stanno cambiando radicalmente i modelli di servizio e i prodotti nel mondo digitale, con impatti su tutti i settori economici. È la rivoluzione del Web 3 che promette grandi opportunità di business per investitori e imprenditori. Che impatto avranno le tecnologie sulla nostra vita personale e professionale? E come cambierà il modo in cui accediamo ai servizi, lavoriamo, impariamo e giochiamo? Vi ringraziamo per la vostra presenza e vi auguriamo una bella serata all'insegna della tecnologia e dell'innovazione. Ah, sì, Biri.
Buonasera a tutti, grazie per essere intervenuti. Inizio in italiano per dare qualche istruzione e spiegazione dell'incontro. Innanzitutto, per chi vuole una traduzione simultanea è disponibile, basta seguire il QR code che c'è sui foglietti sulle sedie, si accede a un sito web, si mette il codice e tramite il vostro telefonino e le cuffie potete seguire la simultanea. Chi ne ha bisogno è possibile avere anche delle cuffiette. Oggi siamo qui con un incontro che abbiamo organizzato sul tema blockchain e metaverso, in continuità con l'ultimo che abbiamo condotto insieme a Alfredo Coppola e Chris Burry. Il tema è molto caldo, ne stanno parlando tutti e oggi cerchiamo di capire perché. Siamo con Amy Peck, che come ha detto Gonario, il robot di Espian, è CEO di Endeavor XR, che è una società con base a San Francisco che si occupa di realtà virtuale, metaverso, realtà aumentata. Amy è anche autrice di un libro che ha fatto un po' di rumore che si chiama Blockchain is the New Black, and then we will ask you why. È anche una molto nota keynote speaker su questi temi. Una delle persone che parla nel podcast Host of the Future Construct, che è un podcast che vi invito a seguire, e nonché membro di varie associazioni internazionali che ogni anno organizzano eventi e raduni su questo tema. Abbiamo Carlo Mannoni, direttore generale della Fondazione di Sardegna, nonché direttore anche di Innois. Due parole su Innois e Fondazione di Sardegna, perché sono sponsor e partner di tutto quello che state vedendo qui, la mostra, gli eventi. Questo ciclo di eventi è organizzato insieme ad Innois grazie al finanziamento della Fondazione di Sardegna, in continuità con l'azione di Innois. Innois è una rete e anche un SRL della Fondazione di Sardegna, con il compito di promuovere l'ecosistema dell'innovazione in Sardegna attraverso vari modi, sia promuovendo il dibattito pubblico, sia promuovendo la promozione, la crescita, la valorizzazione di start-up, sia promuovendo la conoscenza di quali sono i trend del futuro per l'ecosistema sardo. Quindi, so now I switch in English and I would start from Amy, and I would start from the metaverse, because everybody is talking about the metaverse. Not everybody is really sure what is about, and I would like to explain us what is exactly the metaverse and why there is so much hype on it.
Well, I would start by saying that the first time the term metaverse was actually used in literature was by Neil Stephenson, who is the author of Snow Crash. And he basically just described it as a virtual world made out of code, right? Which is at its base form, that's what it is. It's a virtual landscape. I think over the years, the definition has sort of expanded and contracted. In its purest form, it is a digital realm or a digital world or a digital landscape. But as the definition expands, and actually as the technology has gotten better, you can really think about it as this sort of overlay of data and experience over the real world, as well as a fully virtual environment. Because right now, we're not going to put on a headset and go and spend hours and hours in a virtual world, even for a game. But, you know, you've probably played Pokemon Go, or if you have a car that has like a heads-up display that's projected directions, that's augmented reality, and we're sort of moving towards that realm where augmented reality will move into what we call mixed reality or spatial computing, which means that the digital overlays over the real world actually have context in the real world. And that's, to me, what we should be thinking about today when we think about the metaverse. So you don't have to go running in. You don't have to buy land in Decentraland unless you want to pay 450,000 euros to live next door to Snoop Dogg. Seems a little bit of a high price. But it's really the evolution of this sort of digital landscape and of Web 2.
And why there is so much hype? I mean, why everybody's talking about the metaverse? Why everybody is making estimation on the future market? We talk about 33 trillion, and 2 months after we go.
You're taking my investor side, basically.
Yeah. I'm tickling your investor side. Yeah, right. Why?
Well, it's funny because it's gone from, you know, it was like going to be a $68 billion industry, and then it was a $1 trillion industry, and I just saw another one that said it's going to be a $30 trillion industry. What that shows us is that we have a lot of analysts out there with not enough to do because they're speculating on what is an infinite landscape. And so when we work with clients, a lot of times they'll come and they'll say, well, you know, we need to be in the metaverse. And so my question is why? What do you want to do there?
Then we will understand why. But then first thing, we need to be there. Then you will understand why you are in, basically, why you are there, no?
Well, and part of it, I think the speculation really around the economics is doing us a disservice, ourselves a disservice, because we're looking at this from sort of just a financial perspective, and it really is an opportunity to rethink how we do things. So when you know, for companies, it's not as important. I mean, J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the largest, you know, they have a commercial bank and private banking and investment banking arm. You know, and they built a bank in the metaverse. I mean, you know, how many people are really going in? And the demographic is roughly 9 years old to 13 years old. You know, if that's your demographic, that's great. But really the value of the technology is in rethinking how we do things and what are the products and services of the future. And we can simulate any possible outcome in these virtual environments safely. So instead of thinking about what are the economics, we should be thinking about what do we care about as humans and how do we want to move forward, and then how do we use technology to bring us to that vision.
Carlo, I remember that you in Noise organized recently some webinar and some discussion around blockchain and metaverse. What was emerging on the landscape, Italian landscape, Sardinian landscape?
So yes, thank you, and just let me say a few words about the role of Innoise in this framework. As you mentioned, we are, try to understand, I mean, to give our support to the local ecosystem and the Italian ecosystem as a whole, the innovation Italian ecosystem in terms of both, agents that we are organizing activities, as well as we are investor together with other institutions like CAWAR, and together Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, which is the main part of the venture capital environment in Italy. And I think that starting from what Amy said, there is a big hype for sure, okay? And this happened already several times in the last 20 years. I've seen a lot of hypes. And some of this was real, some of this was fake, or some of this was basically not in the right moment and in the right place. Think about, I remember when I was in Tiscali, roughly 20 years ago, no? We developed an application to send voice messages via email. Voice messages via was the average success, not a big success. But now we use the voice messages via WhatsApp. Everybody use it. I mean, we have the problem the other way around. Too many voice messages in our WhatsApp. So just joking, just to try to say that I think, have you ever seen also success and failures? We were thinking about Second Life a few minutes ago, and I always used to remember Google Plus. Who remember Google Plus? Google Plus was a great failure in the social network industry. No? So the big thing is that everybody is aware that there are technologies that are basically ready or going to be ready in a time span which is pretty close, 5 years, I would say, 5 to 10 years probably. So there is a huge opportunity. And I think the way we are going to use this metaverse is not clear exactly what we are, let's say, expecting to see, because we design it as we like it, but at the end of the day, there will be someone that come in the market with his own way and will disrupt this market. It already happened, you know? And but it's huge, because I agree that there are a lot of analysts that are trying to find the next big thing, but since the technology is coming, I think the only question is how and when, which is the right device. Maybe there will be, let's say, devices with a lot of, let's say, features that are not going to be successful, and maybe some easier device that become the killer solution. So this is the point. With regard to metaverse, I would say that Amy, and thank you, Amy, for being here today and for sharing your experience, because one of the reason we are here is exactly to share experiences, to receive and give, let's say, to the rest of the world our experience, our ideas. So I'm very happy today for this exchange. You mentioned the real world, no? Several times. Point is that, as Luciano Flori pointed out, is we are in something that is in between, but on real and online, no? What he calls on life, no? On life. So something that is online but is real life. What happens online to us it became real life. I would say that we are going to have an on-meta life, okay, in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's why we are pushing on this discussion, because we are having seminars on especially artificial intelligence applied to, let's say, the new technologies. And by the way, there is gaming, but there are a lot of things that can happen in this new world. I think for instance, you mentioned banking, but I think, for instance, healthcare or telemedicine will be enormous from this point. Not forgetting, I have to say it, that the big drivers for technology adoption are not, let's say, so, let's say, high in terms of priority, because at the end of the day, a lot of, let's say, basic technology adoption was made by, let's say, the interrelation between people, let's say, entertainment in a broader sense, I would say. Yeah.
We're both thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. So, as a matter of fact, there are a lot of hype about some stars on the metaverse. The fashion vertical selling their digital clothes, jackets, and in the digital world for prices which are crazy for a person used to buy a jacket for real, a shirt for real. So why to buy a digital one to have that or that jacket when I'm playing? But it's something that moves people spending. But it's not, probably it's something that we should look at, but it's not all the landscape. What I understand from your presentation of metaverse is that it's mainly about the moving from 2D to 3D, plus data, plus another ingredient which is blockchain, which is this technology that can certify your data and the ownership of the data. So the last week we said Web 1 was read, the Web 2 was write, the Web 3 is read, write, and own, plus data, plus the 3D layer. So it means devices, it means devices that we know, like the holograms, like the visori, how do you call them? The Oculus, or things that we don't even see, glasses with augmented reality, so all that kind of stuff. But you talked also about business application. I mean, I'm thinking about what can a business do in the metaverse? Training, maybe simulation. You were talking before about how you can simulate in the digital world the real world with the power of data and the artificial intelligence. Which are the kind of application examples you can share with us?
Well, I can give you an example of a pharma client that came to us at the beginning of COVID, and they had to retrofit one of their manufacturing lines urgently for to actually start producing the COVID drugs. And so there's a few things that had to happen. First, they needed a digital twin of their manufacturing line. And a digital twin is exactly as it sounds. It is a digital replica of a physical object. So there's a lot of compliance that goes around any kind of a manufacturing line that is in the pharma industry. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is they needed to be able to train the technicians on that line as it was being built, because there was such a rush, as you remember, to get these drugs on the market. So what that allowed them to do, first of all, was to be able to simulate the entire line, to be able to bring inspectors in to actually ensure that they were compliant for that line. At the same time, be able to train those workers on that line so that the day they were opened, they were ready and trained. Then moving from VR to AR, being able to use glasses like Magic Leap or HoloLens 2 to be able to give them reminders, or if there was a line stoppage, to be able to use those glasses to fix the problem. So that's just one example. How AI fits into that is on the back end, AI can monitor the process from end to end. And so bringing AI, it's called closed loop optimization. It essentially means that all of the sensors are sending all of the data and information to ensure that there's uptime, and there's no stoppages, but also measuring the optimization and the productivity, and then using machine learning to recommend different tweaks to improve the productivity. So it's basically a process that learns from itself and then improves itself. And that's just one of a million examples.
And of total quality from Toyota.
Moving from the 80s, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, and and what's the role of blockchain? You wrote a book which was whose title was "Blockchain is the New Black." Why?
Well, so the idea around it was, if you look at the hype cycles around technology, I think the original was IoT, right? Everyone's talking about IoT, but people have been talking about IoT for 30 years, and it's still, we're not quite there. Then it was, AI, then it was blockchain, now it's the metaverse. So, everyone, I think it was Andy Warhol said everyone has 15 minutes of fame. All the technologies have 15 minutes of fame. So that was the sort of joke behind blockchain is the new black. It's like, this is the thing of the moment. And again, I would urge anyone learning about these technologies to have a more kind of human approach to how do we use the technology to actually innovate around, humanity, around impact, around, even if it is improving process, and then using the technology to kind of backfill against it instead of putting technology first all the time. So, blockchain is actually an incredibly elegant technology, and we're just cracking the surface. That has also fallen into a tremendous hype cycle because people, confuse the underlying tech of blockchain and cryptocurrency. There's a lot of scamming and shenanigans going on with cryptocurrency, and a lot of, just the market's been going up and down. Blockchain's been, Bitcoin's been crashing. So the whole of blockchain, everyone's been thinking, well, this isn't really a real technology, but the technology is real. And so I think, again, it figures in at a number of different ways. So in Decentraland, it's allowing this decentralized construct. But around identity, it starts to get very interesting. So it allows us, how you I don't know if any of you are guilty of this, but spending hours on their Instagram profiles and their Facebook profiles that are little moments of a polished version of your life. And then on the other side, with blockchain and with this your self-sovereign identity, which means you control your identity and your data, you can actually do the same with your private data. So your financial data, your personal data, your birth records, and you can make that data available in exchange for some kind of value, because we all know what's happening now. That data is getting harvested behind our back. We're being manipulated really by big tech, and being fed fake news. We're being fed products and services that are put in our line of sight and make us feel somehow lesser. So that's something I think we need to look at individually, is how do we individually want to play? And I think we have a responsibility to take back control of our data and leverage the technology for what it's really good at.
This is quite revolutionary, I think, because it's try to apply the blockchain technology to the management of our data. It's a totally, let's say, new thing. It is very interesting because we are quite used to, let's say, give away our data because we don't care, basically. What we will receive, the trade-off is basically okay for a standard person, unless you are, let's say, a public person or an actor or what else. So if you just understand there is, let's say, some data that is used to give you advice or suggestion, it's not such a big deal, no? And probably you are going to buy something or some one of these advices. But the idea that, let's say, this is disruptive, I would say, because if we compare to the value chain of the major big companies, big data companies at the end of the day that are up today, you are basically disrupting their value chain. So it's something that is totally revolutionary and worth thinking about it and studied. As a blockchain, as a general, let's say, technology, I would say that I agree there is, let's say, a lot of the hype comes from the mining and so on and so forth, and all the tricks, let's say, made to create new coins and these things.
Some experience on financials. So what do you think
about
Bitcoin?
Yeah, I have some experience on financial, and I have also some experience on coins that are not based on let's say, like Bitcoins, but are real economy coins. But yes, let's say, as a general rule, I think that the blockchain technology, and also with Sardes, we are working on, let's say, to use the blockchain as a transaction platform, basically, no? And that's why I think that the technology is very interesting and is very important, because we go to the famous decentralized world. When we started with Web 1, everybody, I mean, we call it philosophy. We call it, I mean, internet gives you the freedom, no? Freedom. So what happened is that Web 1 and Web 2, say reading, writing, seeing videos, basically they tend naturally to go to oligopoly or monopoly, okay? This is the big, say, catch. If you can see the last 20 years, is that the winner is going to take almost all. For a certain period of time, for sure, then they will live their life in the nightmare that someone else, let's say, student from Stanford will find the new algorithm, they will put them aside, but this is the story, the winners. And the Web3, I've seen a lot of interviews also from the guys that made billions with Web 1 and Web 3 and Web 2 saying, oh, this was bullshit. Now Web 3 is real democratic. So I have a question, because it was the same thing they used to say 20 years ago and 10 years ago. So this is the big thing. Is Web 3 really going to be a decentralized, democratic and self-manageable framework? Question mark.
Yeah, it's a little complicated. First of all, because we are kind of fundamentally lazy. And it's going to be a lot of work to manage our data. But you know, the Web 1 construct, like the early days of chat rooms, it was distributed. The servers were individual laptops. So we're kind of moving back to that construct. So it's not completely out of the realm that, you know, this is sort of, now the technology is, you know, as you mentioned, and now it's more ready for prime time, but we're still a really long way off. You know, the concept of DAOs, you know, and this sort of decentralized organizations and self-organizing groups, we don't understand, they haven't been in you know, active long enough for us to understand cause and effect. And you know, there's a lot of constructs for people to try and, you know, whether it's proof of stake or proof of work, where we're trying to make it equitable, but we haven't figured out what that balance is. And we talked a little bit earlier too about what could a new construct of the value system be. So I think these new models are emerging, and so that's really what's interesting to me. And you did mention disrupting the big players who own all the data, but there actually is, and we've done a little bit of work on and some research on this, the interface that allows this exchange of data and allows us to manage our data automatically on the blockchain through a series of smart contracts. That is the next revenue generator, and that will, in theory, be exponentially greater than, you know, what Facebook is making now and Google is making now. But again, you know, it cannot be owned by a single company. So the idea is that, you know, multiple companies are participating, but really we as individuals are the ones who are managing our data, and we're getting some value for it. I mean, I think, you know, yes, if you want a little bit of Bitcoin for your data, great. But if you want something that's experiential or that fascinates you in some way, or a digital asset where it actually has an experience tied to it, where you see maybe the creator and how it was manufactured, you know, there's this whole side of storytelling and curiosity, and that's where the business side starts to really blend with the storytelling and the game side of things, and that's where we start to get to the creator economy.
You're thinking about NFT also?
You had to say NFT. Yeah, so right now, again, there's a lot of nonsense going on with NFTs, mainly around artificial scarcity, right? The digital landscape is infinite. We are limited only by the number of data centers on the planet, which we have to think about from an environmental point of view, but we will solve some of those problems. But NFT, where it starts to get interesting, is in this value construct where you buy an NFT and you have maybe a digital asset that is connected to a physical asset, But the experience grows. So maybe there's an event that you get access to, or maybe again, there's this origin story, right? About, here was the inspiration for this product, here was the designer's vision board, here's what it looks like on the manufacturing line. We don't know. It's something that really blends storytelling and creation and art with commerce in a way that we have not been able to do before.
I agree. If I can say something on this, for sure, NFTs, we have seen a lot of, let's say, strange events in the recent period, but I would say that what I see as a strange thing, my daughter see it as let's say, a standard event, basically. So I have to ask myself, I'm out of this big event, because coming back to what we said before, on life and so on, what is for us something that maybe is crazy, it is not for our younger people, So you can see a market there, because for me, something that has no value has a value for someone else, and this is very interesting. And also, NFT, it's like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a big hype, which is, let's say, maybe with some critical thing, but as in general, it's not a crazy thing to create, let's say, means of to use for transaction or for investment. It's a new thing, and it's possible in let's say, in general terms. And the same thing I see for NFT, because, for instance, all the, let's say, uses of this kind of similar technologies for to defend property, property rights, for instance, or art, let's say the coupling. There are thousands of applications on this that are not so crazy, like buying these small, I don't know, it is pictures of this dog, or I don't know what.
Dogecoin.
What is the name?
Well, there's
Dogecoin. There are crazy things, but aside of this, there are real things that are happening, I think. For instance, in the art sector, for sure, and we have some guy here in Sardinia too that is working with this in terms of legal things and the impact in the art industry.
Okay, so on one side we have this utopia of having this second world where you can have your digital twin, your avatar, your identity, playing infinite roles, infinite lives with no responsibility at all. Because when you game, you kill somebody. So on one side, you have this utopia. On the other side, you mentioned something which is, I think, the most interesting part of this technology new scenario. Answering how can we solve the problems we have as humans, environmental, social, and so on, thanks to this new technology. I'm thinking about some applications on, let's say, about blockchain application for social goods, or for evaluating and measuring or certifying the impact of an investment. So that's, I think, it's very interesting, because you have, again, data, you have tracking, you have ownership of the data, and I've heard about some cases, and you told us just before some interesting cases. Can you share it with us?
Yeah, even something as simple as a diamond, right? From getting the origin story of where a diamond comes from to ensure that they're not blood diamonds. An origin story can be sort of a, we call blockchain, the truth machine, right? Or it's a digital truth. And it allows us to understand in the life cycle of any product, like, where fish are coming from. Are they, poaching in seas where there are endangered species? So these kinds of things is really the overarching methodology should be around transparency. and that we should not be afraid, especially companies, should not be afraid to be open and transparent. And it's a frightening construct because we also have, this sort of competitive advantage piece, right? We're all competitors. I think we were talking last night about this new idea that's coming out where it's like collaboration is the new competition. That we have actually, without getting too, heavy, some very, very serious problems that we're facing, in the world today. And I think what's happened is we as individuals, for many, many reasons, but because of the political system, we don't feel like we have any impact as an individual. But if there's one thing that COVID taught us is that globally, we can stand shoulder to shoulder against an unseen enemy and change. I mean, think how much your life has changed in the last 2 years. And was it a disaster? No, I mean, it saved a lot of people. And it's a shame that we need to get to that level of problem before we act globally. And so we talk a lot about, community, like individual responsibility, and then we have our families, and then we have our communities, and we have our online communities. You never hear people talk about being a human. No one ever says, like, I'm part of the global citizenry. No one says that. We need to start thinking about that as our, if you're thinking of all of your communities in a hierarchical structure, it's probably not a good word to use for Italian translation, a funnel. We have to now start feeling more connected to each other globally and recognizing that as consumers and individuals, we actually have a lot of power and a lot of agency, and we can use this technology for good. We can also have a ton of fun, great games, great ideas, great music, great art. But we really can change the outcome. And again, so the technology for me is sort of the enabler. It's really, I think we need to be a little bit more open and trusting that our voices can be heard and then leverage the technology.
If I can elaborate on this, yes. I totally agree with Amy, and I want to add something about, let's say, what is part of my job, which is from one side, invest in projects, and then try to understand if these projects are working well and are, let's say, confirming the targets and the objectives that they declared at the very beginning. On the other side, in the financial system, I think there is an important part of this because everybody now is quite familiar with the ESG, environment, social and governance. No, everybody is mentioning these three. Yes, there is these three letters in the investment world. I mean, as an investor, it's more than 10 years that we listen to this. But together is coming a lot of scamming because you have heard about this famous greenwashing stuff, no? So using the appropriate technology probably will allow everybody to be more accountable, and for us as citizens, meaning consumer investors and other activities human used to do, having the clear view if we are doing the right thing, no? So everybody thinks about, let's say, investing in the proper way, but if you have a layer which is based on transparency, basically, which is not only the transparency that I declare to you that I'm a very good guy, something more than this, and this kind of technology can allow us to be very, let's say, reliable on the investments, let's say, on the product side, and also to be very aware of what we do on the consumer and investor side.
So impact, tracking the impact, tracking the way, the responsibility, follow-up of your actions. Let's go to the trust. I mean, probably some application of, again, blockchain could be applied to the fundamental of transaction, the trust. I'm selling to you something, you're buying to me something, I believe your money is good, you believe my good is worth the price. And there is a very complex evaluation upon that. Economy is everything about making choices on economic transactions, which are not always rational. Can be a lot of irrational, mostly are irrational. Can you quote some examples where this value, the value construct, is impacted by this kind of technology?
Well, I think it's one of the opportunities that we have to kind of redefine how we think about value. For example, I think I gave you the example. If I was going to sell you these sunglasses, really your data is a database, right? So it is a database query, right? It's a computer query into your database, and then you have this layer that's going to say, yes, I'm going to allow Amy to have these 5 data points that I'm requesting. And you can even ask me the same thing, like, how much did this cost me to make? Are there 14-year-olds working in a sweatshop in Indonesia to make these? So some of the things that we really care about as consumers, but that price is only between you and I. So you don't just walk into a store, these are $45 or euros, no matter where you are, unless you happen to get lucky and get them on sale. It's actually a true peer-to-peer economy. And we've already seen the peer-to-peer economy kind of burgeon. But you've got, for example, with things like Uber, right? So Uber and Lyft, you've got Uber as the interface. That can actually go away with blockchain, and it can be a direct relationship between the buyer and seller. The buyer can be, an individual or a company or a brand. And all of these constructs exist in a certain form today. A lot of companies are fighting back against, the behemoth that is Amazon by having a direct-to-consumer play. So they're already marketing directly to their consumers. They're already selling directly to their consumers. So this is in a lot of ways sort of a logical evolution. And I think as consumers, if consumers care about the companies that they're buying from, they can demand to know more, and that is going to, ensure that we're getting more and more and more transparent information on these business practices from these companies. And you look at the, global, F100 or F500, half of those companies are going to be gone or certainly out of the F500 over the next decade. And there are going to be a lot of new companies coming up, and those companies with a foundation of culture and transparency and using technology for good and impact, I believe are the ones that are going to win moving forward. And if you look at things to invest in, that's where I'd put my money.
Tricky question from an old sociologist, I would say. It's an image of the world where there is the individual fully in power of information, fully aware of her desire, of his means, with a lot of time to decide each transaction if it's worth or not. But we know that people, the average, the mass, it doesn't want to spend too much time in choosing and making evaluation every transaction they do. And the world works with intermediaries you trust on. I go to the bank, for example, to buy to put my savings, and I trust the bank. I trust the person who says me, put your money there, because I explain you something, you don't understand anything because it's too much complex. I trust the person. And so I'm moving my trust to another organization. So is this my question is, yes, this is really a very nice utopia, fully transparency, individual freedom of choosing your own transaction every time, in a free world, in an open market, but we know that doesn't work like that. We know that there is marketing within, there is building of trust, and there is artificial intelligence. The second time I go on my Amazon, but if I go to Vola Gratis or choosing my flight, The first time I find a flight at 100 euros, so the second time, Airbnb, Booking.com. The price changes on the base of my visits on the site because they read the cookies. So I discovered that I put.
You need a VPN so you can change your location, get the best price.
I'm using,
While you're working, basically. You know?
Yes, so that's it. So,
I have if I can say something on this because it's very interesting. I'm at the very beginning, the beginning of this century. You know, we were working on the Web 1, no, and we used to have this mantra book, and the title was "Don't Make Me Think." Don't make me think, because people, I mean, all the web is based on this assumption that you have to think. You don't need to think too much to make your choice. You know.
What is Google?
Yeah.
Google
And actually, this book, was interesting because it used to say that a lot of Americans thought at the time that Yahoo was the internet. No, nobody was typing on the HTTP stuff, but was typing in the search box, thinking that was the internet. So back to now, I think we are going to have something that is, let's say, it's a mixed reality in some way. So we have something that is on meta blockchain life, okay? But every now and then you have to go to the bank and sit down with someone. Not often, but every now and then you have to do it. That's my view.
Yeah, I think so. I think it will be very interesting how you build trust on these middle layers. For example, I don't know, maybe DAOs technology is something going that direction? Well, what is DAO for everybody?
So a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. So the idea is that everybody has a say. It's not, a leader, everyone in theory has, again, in practice it can be challenging, but we're also learning kind of as we go. But relative to that, well, first of all, the interface is going to be very much automated. But some of you are of the age where maybe you remember not wanting to put your credit card into an e-commerce site, right? Because you were like, where's this going? Right? So we're forgetting also that there's a generational component to this. Like my kids are pure digital natives. Their kids are going to live in a version of the metaverse. They're not going to refer to it as a metaverse. They're not going to say, I'm going into virtual reality or augmented reality or mixed reality, just like we don't say, oh, I'm going to call you on my mobile phone. Like you just do. I'm going to call you. So there is going to be a generational component, but I would say that all of us don't have to check out. I think a lot of people are scared of technology and scared of sort of keeping up with it. But I think it's important for all of us to stay as connected to technology as we can manage in our day-to-day and be part of the evolution. So I also think generationally we just go, wow, look at those crazy kids. Like they're all idealistic. They're going to solve all the environmental problems that we have left for them. You're welcome. Let us know how it turns out. And I feel like again we have to have that more sort of global human approach. And I think there are very small things that we can do to make that a reality. And I had somebody at the airport once. We saw each other like 3 different times, like at the ticket counter, and then I saw him going through security. And then we both ended up at Starbucks together because that's the American dream. I'm sorry, I know it's like horrifying that I drink Starbucks, but I do on the plane. And he was ahead of me, and he said, well, we've seen each other 3 times now, and he bought me a coffee. And that seems like just a sort of a nice, like heartwarming little American story, but the reality is like that has had such an impact on my life because I do that now every once in a while. Just sometimes they don't even know. Like I just go, I'm going to pay for that person's coffee behind me, or I'm going to buy this person's grocery, or someone's like fumbling for coins and I just pay for it. And it doesn't have to be paying, but just these kind of random things that I promise you, first of all, you'll feel amazing. It doesn't matter which side you're on. And again, this goes completely away from technology, because it's not about the technology. It's about, who we are and what we're used to. And again, your daughter is 13 now? 12 now. So she's a digital native, but her children are going to live in this completely different world, and these things will be much more normal to them and sort of transacting in a much more peer-to-peer, one-on-one way. And I do hope that this trend of accountability does hold, because greenwashing is a thing. The companies now, they just know they have to do it, just like their D&I, like they're like, oh yeah, we have to like open this up to women, like we got to get a woman on the board, or we got to get a person of color. They don't really care. They will, when they're no longer, when we as consumers are saying, we're not going to work with you if you don't have a diverse workforce, or if you are not really doing something for the environment. But again, that is our power, and it's all of us. That is the thing that transcends generations.
I'd love to meet you at the airport, by the way.
Free coffee's on me if you see me at the airport, for every one of you.
But okay, so let's close. We have 10 minutes more. Which are the most amazing projects you heard about, you worked on in the last months?
I don't know. I had one of my favorite ones was a really early one we did with one of the large retailers that you all know who it is, on their manufacturing line. They actually manufacture, they're so big, they manufacture their own boxes and bags for shipping. That's how much they ship. And they were having some challenges because they hire all of these new employees for the seasons every year as like, Christmas comes up and gift giving goes up. And there were a lot of accidents. A lot of accidents where people were getting hurt, or just, they weren't being trained properly. And so we did a study using the eye tracking on the VR devices. It was actually a mixed reality device, but we used the eye tracking to detect, because everyone's on a schedule, right? So you come in, you do, your 8 to 12, you take a 20-minute break, and then you do your thing. And everyone was on the same schedule, right? It was 4 hours on, 20 minutes off. But we used that data because there's a lot of biometric data. Now, in this, and this is one of my early jobs, I realized that this is healthcare data, and it's personal data. And I was kind of terrified to bring this up to them because they're a huge company, and I think we were 4 in my company then. And I said, I don't feel comfortable with you having access to this data. So I worked with their IT departments, and we took the data. They had a public Wi-Fi system, but we partitioned off a piece of the public Wi-Fi system and made it private. So the data went directly from the eye tracking through the algorithms that basically detected whether they were tired or losing productivity, went directly to them on their phones. So that gave them the power to decide, actually, I'm seeing that I'm getting tired, even if I don't feel tired, I'm going to take my break now. And this is just, this is a while ago now. This is 7, 8 years ago now. And just one small example of sort of taking that control. Wellness is another example. We're in control of our wellness. So these are trends in general that I'm finding really exciting. So I don't think it's that far off that we could manage our data. We're starting to a little bit and take care of ourselves better. You mentioned the healthcare industry. I think that's going to explode over the next few years, but personal wellness is something that I'm, particularly interested in and think is going to be a huge market.
Carlo, you mentioned Sardex. Amy doesn't know, but Sardex is an exchange. It's an exchange alternative.
An exchange of, let's say, it's a supply chain finance solution. It's based on a coin, which is one coin equal to €1, so there is no hype on negotiating, but it's a network, basically. Yeah.
So, okay, it was an very early experiment in Sardinia.
Yeah.
It was 15 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago. So, any other project in Sardinia that you met in these months?
This is difficult because now I was thinking about the answer. I say, what you have seen in the last 2 months, as it was not so cool because it was the renewal of the governance of my foundation. It was nothing to do with technology. I mean, unless we voted via a system, let's say online system.
You didn't
once.
make the digital twin of the foundation yet?
No, not yet.
You should.
But I mean, no, I mean, Sardex is an idea, but I mean, this is one of the projects we are supporting, and we are working on it. We are investing in different funds. At the moment, what I've seen more than other areas is, let's say, technology and artificial intelligence applied to the financial market. So investments, as we mentioned before, networking, and also loans, no? So the way, so in my job, a lot of things is related to finance. The other thing that we are, let's say, starting to analyze and to consider as potential investment is on the biotech and healthcare as a whole market. I strongly believe this is going to be one of the big real application of this technology, because at the end of the day, especially in Europe, we have, and of course, the cost, in terms of cost, US is worse, is in a worse position compared to us. But in Europe, since we have this welfare system, that is general welfare system for everybody, we need to use this kind of technology to allow us to maintain this level of assistance in this broad way. So, and I think if we see it in a time span which is 15 to 20 years, it's also one of the way to reduce quite strongly the costs of the welfare system. And by the way, we have a big problem. We don't have enough doctors, so we need to use some technology for that. And as a general thing, I think this is the big thing. I know also in Sardinia, there is people that is working on this, that is investing on this, and we made a couple of investments in a couple of funds, and I see the big hype for me is in that market.
That's very interesting. So application to the welfare, which is probably and healthcare, yeah, which is something distinctive in the Western world and certainly in Europe. Okay, so thank you very much to Carlo Mannoni, Director of INOIS and the Fondazione di Sardegna. Thank you very much, Amy Peck, for coming here. You will stay here some days, so there will be, for some of you, probably the occasion to meet her again. There is a coffee break after this, and all the event was recorded, and tomorrow is available on matextv.com. Tutto l'evento è registrato e sarà disponibile su matextv.com. Grazie a tutti, grazie Amy, grazie Carlo.